Hello, Canada Files viewers. This is Aidan Jonah, editor-in-chief of the Canada Files. I am here speaking with Alex Tyrell, the leader of the Green Party of Quebec. Alex, thank you for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're talking about Yves Engler for a second time. First time the Canada Files spoke to Dimitri Lascaris, but Alex, you have some updates on this case. So, for the audience's memory, he's facing a few charges: intimidation, harassment, harassing communication, and supposedly intimidation of a police officer, which, get this, was for posting about a conversation with an officer from the Montreal police. But anyways, we've discussed some of that with Dimitri Lascaris, so we're not going to go too far into the very basics. But Alex, you've been very active in this. Let's talk about this situation. When did Eve have to go to jail in the first place? Did this happen before the weekend? Was this dragged out by the police?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, he had received a call. I believe it was on Tuesday last week, saying that he was scheduled to be arrested because of some comments that he had made on Twitter towards a Zionist influencer. These were not violent comments. They were not threats. It was not hate speech. It was simply criticizing her for her support of Israel, her hatred of Palestinians, and that sort of thing. So really nothing that was problematic. And so they had scheduled him to be arrested for Thursday morning. So I was with him when he turned himself in at the Montreal police station. He had a brief appearance in court that afternoon. At that point, the prosecution used their discretionary power to oppose his release without providing a motive. He spent the night in jail. Friday, he came back to court for another hearing in which the prosecution asked for conditions to be imposed in exchange for his release, including that he would not be able to mention directly or indirectly the Zionist influencer who had complained to police with the help of a law firm headed by Neil Oberman, a conservative candidate in the Mount Royal district, the same lawyer actually who had failed to get an injunction to dismantle the McGill encampment because he didn't have enough evidence. So Eve on Friday was not willing to accept those very restrictive conditions. And so on the Friday hearing, there was no evidence or arguments made about the conditions. That was scheduled for Monday, which meant that he had to spend the weekend in jail. And basically on Monday, what happened was it was the first time that the judge, any judge, had really looked at any of the evidence in the case. And when the judge saw what the prosecution was saying, she basically cut them off before the defense even had time to make their arguments and encouraged them to reduce the scope of the conditions.
So let's talk about that. In the first place, there were some delays for Eve to even get to the courthouse. Is that correct?
Yeah, so his hearing had been scheduled for Monday morning at 9:30. We called a lot of supporters. The courtroom was actually completely packed. They had to open an overflow room with a video feed. And we got there, and it turned out that there had been a clerical error, that the transcript, I guess, of the Friday hearing had indicated that his next appearance would be on Tuesday, whereas it was an error on the transcript. It was actually for Monday, and both the prosecution and defense agreed that it was supposed to be for Monday. There's also the fact that Eve hadn't been able to speak with his lawyer between the Friday hearing and the Monday morning. Well, Monday afternoon, actually, when he arrived finally at the courthouse. The judge actually took the extraordinary step of getting down from the bench and going and calling from the middle of the courtroom the jail to make sure that Eve would get there as quickly as possible and that he would be able to speak to his lawyer immediately.
Wow. So what happened through the rest of this bail hearing?
Well, that's it. So in the afternoon, we got in there to the hearing. Finally, it was later in the afternoon, and the prosecution started going through their case. They had 72 different tweets that Eve had directed at this influencer. They highlighted one of them in which Eve had said that this person was, wanted to see more Palestinian children killed, that 20,000 was not enough for her. She wants more. Completely fair comment, given the hateful nature of everything that was said by this influencer. Actually, Eve's lawyer asked me to put together some screenshots of what the influencer had said, and I analyzed over 3,200 tweets with the help of AI. But we came out with uh, a list of 40 very hateful, very racist tweets towards Palestinians, going as far as to say that Palestinian children are indoctrinated into a sort of terror mentality while they're still in the womb. So this is like the most racist stuff that you can really say. And it's incredible that the police would think that if somebody is going and pumping out all this hateful rhetoric with 50,000 followers on Twitter, that people not respond to it. So it was a bit surreal. So Eve was there in the courtroom. He was in handcuffs and leg restraints also. And the prosecution was going through different tweets that had been made, but nothing was really shocking or violent or hateful or anything like that. They also went through the chronological order of events as to when the complaint was initially filed with the police by the influencer in the month of August 2024. The police closed the case, presumably because there was not any grounds to proceed with. And it's only in December when Neil Oberman, the conservative candidate, began representing the influencer and pressured the police through legal means to go forward with charges. Even then, it took them over 2 months to actually make the arrest and press the charges, but they did it, right? And so basically, Eve spent 5 days on jail, mostly on the discretion of the police to make arrests without, very strong evidence, the discretion of the prosecution to deny bail on the first day, and then the fact that on the third day, they asked for these conditions that he would not accept, and the fact that there was a weekend in there as well.
Right. Now, Eve did obviously he did get bail, but he is continuing to face these ongoing four charges. So when is Eve's next court hearing? And also with Oberman
Yeah.
now, what are your thoughts? You had certainly had some thoughts about his political future on X, so I'd like to hear you expound that for the audience.
Yeah, so that's it. Eve's next court date is April 25th. I believe it's to schedule the trial or to move towards the trial. It's not the trial date. These things could take a certain amount of time. Um, and he's got conditions like some routine conditions like not allowed to carry weapons, having to reside at his home address, that kind of thing. But it's still a little bit restrictive, and he's still not allowed to name the police officer that investigated the case and laid the charges. But he was more interested in being able to name the Zionist influencer. And basically, the compromise that they came to, because the judge cut off the prosecution while they were making their argument, and said, "Look, you have to come to some sort of an agreement here." And the judge pointed out how large those conditions were, that he not be able to mention her directly or indirectly. And essentially, the judge suggested that perhaps the compromise would be that he could mention her and speak freely about everything, but that he would not be able to tag her on Instagram or on Twitter or anything like that. So it's kind of like, it's like a Twitter court kind of, it's really incredible that this is what it's at. But that's it. So anyway, those are the conditions that he's got. And in terms of Neil Oberman, that's it. It's this lawyer, this wacko lawyer from Montreal, who is in like a competition for the Mount Royal seat, right? Like it's a heavily Jewish neighborhood, and he's sort of like in a competition with Anthony Housefather to see who can be the most Zionist. And these people will stop at nothing, right? And the Conservative Party has called for the criminalization of people who support Palestine. When we had a protest about the anti-NATO summit in Montreal, and there was a little bit of vandalism that occurred, Pierre Poilievre called for the protesters to be deported, like really racist stuff. And so, in this context of trying to be the most Zionist candidate in Mount Royal, I think Oberman is trying to get himself some credibility and some visibility, first by attempting to have the McGill encampment shut down through an injunction that was denied because he didn't have any evidence or didn't have sufficient evidence to convince the judge. In the end, the McGill encampment was dismantled, but they were not able to get police to dismantle it. They had to hire private security because they're not able to get the injunction because they were not able to prove that harm was being done by the presence of the protesters. So it's a kind of similar in this case, in my view. It's that Oberman has a legal firm. He knows how to utilize and weaponize the justice system, and he's attempting to take aim at Yves Engler, a very outspoken pro-Palestinian activist here in Montreal. But once again, without the evidence, in my view, and without really respect for Yves' civil liberties.
Well, Zionists in Canada certainly don't have a track record of caring for civil liberties, so I can't say that I'm shocked, even though it's disgraceful. Now, I do want to ask, how did you personally get involved around Eve's defense in this kind of way? Now, obviously, you've known Eve for some time, but I think the audience would like to know this.
Yeah, sure. So I've known Eve, I guess, since about 2016 when we had a big debate in the Green Party about boycott and divestment and sanction of Israel. And I followed his work, read his books, and I appear on his podcast sometimes. He appears on mine. I see him in a lot of protests and stuff like that. And really, we have a lot of very common points of view. So when I saw that he was scheduled to be arrested, well, I reached out and asked him if he needed any help. And so he put my name on the press release the last press release that he sent out um, before being arrested. He asked me to videotape his statement there and send it out. And I've also known his lawyer, John Philpott, for a few years now. And so that's it. So my role was sort of trying to get the word out about what was taking place. I would go to the courthouse and sort of take notes and tweet updates for people. And I was made a little graphic about Eve being a political prisoner. I wrote to people, influential people asking for support. We managed to get the support of, for example, Ellen Gabriel of the Mohawk community, a very strong Indigenous leader and Palestinian rights supporter here in in the Montreal area. Also, Canadian Senator Yenpo Wu spoke out in favor. Aaron Mate, Roger Waters also published a video. So I was sort of doing a PR role because Eve was completely out of communication while he was in the jail and could not speak, could not phone anybody, and really could not even phone his lawyer.
All right, Alex, well, thank you very much there for speaking with the Canada Files. Now, I certainly think if this outlet is able to, we would certainly like to speak with Eve, but we hope you can have some perspective on the situation with Dimitri and now the voice of Alex Tyrell. So, Alex, thanks for speaking with the Canada Files.
Thanks very much, and I think you'll be able to reach Eve pretty soon because he's not the kind of guy who stays away from his work too long. And actually, when he came out of jail, he was holding 7 different articles that he had written while he was in there.
That does not surprise me in the slightest. He's a machine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to the CanFL's audience, if you appreciate the journalism, the analysis the CanFL's does, please do consider, if you haven't already, setting up a monthly, annual, or one-time donation. If you can't do that, finances are rough. Please consider sharing the work, helping it spread and grow. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you again, Alex. And now I will say one thing. How should people keep up with your work?
People can follow me primarily on X at Alex Tyrell PVQ, also on Facebook and on the Green Party of Quebec website.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex, once more, and I will see you all for the next interview. Goodbye.